My name is Naomi Jane,
I'm Michelle Voigt.
and you're watching Santa Barbara Talks with Josh Molina.
Welcome to Santa Barbara Talks with Josh Molina. It's such a pleasure today to be here with Santa Barbara City Councilman Oscar Gutierrez. And before we get talking, this is my first episode as the new editor of the Santa Barbara News Press. So I'm so excited to be in this new role. I've tried to touch up the podcast a bit visually, and we'll see what it looks like. But I appreciate Oscar being my first conversation and interview in this new era for me. So thank you. And welcome to the show, Oscar. Happy birthday, by the way. I hear It's your birthday. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you. Yeah, I'm honored that I'm the first guest you're having since you took on this great new role, which I'm really happy for you and the news press and the community overall that you're going to be taking over that publication.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate that. And I'm super excited. And, I've talked a little bit about it elsewhere, and I'm going to keep talking about it. But today, Oscar, I want to just dive in. We haven't talked in a while. You've been one of my guests over the years on this podcast. We always have really good conversations. So there's so much to catch up on. And let's just start with, I cover City Hall, and you were out a little bit, a few weeks in the fall. And you, I guess, went on some city trips to China, Japan, some cultural experiences, some city business. That's amazing, And I just one of the things I enjoy about talking to you about is, we're kind of similar. We grew up in this town, similar upbringings, and I've never been to Japan, I've never been to China, and you got elected, and all of these opportunities have come up. So I'm so proud of you that, you're able to experience that, because not all of us local kids can do that or have done that. And you're out there really taking advantage of all these incredible opportunities that you made happen for yourself. So that's awesome. So talk to me. What was going on over there? What'd you do?
Yeah, thanks. I do want to acknowledge how blessed and lucky I am to have the opportunity. And I want to thank the people of Santa Barbara and my community for allowing me to have that opportunity. And so ever since I got elected, I've always been fascinated with our Sister Cities program. And for those people that don't know what the Sister Cities program is, it was started by former President Dwight D. Eisenhower after World War II. Obviously, he was a general during World War II, and he saw the damage it caused the entire world. And in a way to deter another world war, he developed a program where cities from all over the world would become friends, sister cities, and they exchange cultures and beliefs and ideas and the hopes of avoiding another world war. So Santa Barbara has had several sister cities in the past. Sometimes sister cities start and then they kind of dissolve over time because either city kind of loses interest or the people that are involved with that sister city pass away, and we lose the connection, but new ones form. So since I've been elected, I've been lucky enough to go to our sister city in Puerto Vallarta, Mexico, Weihai, China, Toba, Japan, and Miraflores, Peru. So we have two other ones. We have one in Qatar, Montenegro, and one in Patrice in Greece. So those are the two I haven't gone to yet, but I'm hoping to be able to go before my term ends. But yeah, I was lucky enough that these SoCal Sister Cities program reached out to the council. First they reached out to Mayor Randy Rouse. He wasn't able to go. And then they kind of opened it up to all of us on council. And when the majority said they couldn't go, I obviously spoke up saying that I would be able to go to Japan or willing to go to Japan for a Sister Cities trip. So it was a leadership summit that they had in Japan, and it spanned over a few different cities. So we first started in Osaka, and we got to go tour the World Expo, and it was this huge event where not every country, but several countries from around the world had a exhibit hall kind of highlighting their country. So we obviously had one, the United States, and several other countries had them. There was just like hundreds of thousands of people there. It was huge. It was massive. They actually built the largest wooden structure around the entire expo. And the Guinness Book of World Records actually put a plaque saying that this is the largest wooden structure ever assembled. It was pretty awesome, pretty amazing. And so we spent like a day there, and then we went to this region called Yamanashi, where it was at the base of a Mount Fuji, and we got to meet with a lot of business executives there in Japan, and they kind of were like meeting us, asking what or how we can work together, our cities can work with their businesses. And then we went to Tokyo and we spoke to the University of the United Nations there, and we talked about our cities and what we're doing for the environment and what we're doing with AI. So a lot of Santa Barbara obviously is very tied closely with the environment, but a lot of people don't realize we're also very tied. We're tied closely to AI because we have Google, and Google just created this new quantum chip that is the most advanced in the world, and it's right here in Santa Barbara, and it's going to really help kind of develop AI, and a lot of people were very excited about that, and a lot of the mayors in the area came to meet with us, and there were people from like the mayor of Berkeley was with me, the CEO of Santa Barbara County was with me, city council members from all over the state were there. There was about 24 of us total. So it was quite an experience. It was pretty awesome. And then I stayed in Tokyo for like, I want to say like almost 2 weeks, just because it's an amazing place. It's an amazing culture, amazing city. I just was going on trips around the city. And then I felt like I wanted to explore more. So I went to South Korea. I went to Seoul. And while I was in Seoul, that was just sightseeing. You know, there was no official sister city business there. But I traveled around Seoul. I went to the border of South Korea, North Korea, and I got to witness what North Korea looks like from a distance. We were probably a good 20 miles away, but we could see a city in the distance, and it was kind of eerie because you couldn't see any cars, no airplanes, no movement at all, but you could tell it was a city, and that was surreal to be able to experience that.
So, I mean, that must be amazing when you're wandering around there, you know, and you're party, you know, city business, or you're traveling. Are you kind of like in two worlds, you know? Are you sometimes thinking about like, wow, I can't believe I'm here, growing up in Santa Barbara, and now I have this incredible opportunity. What is that like for you, just as Oscar, the man, to be able to have that opportunity? And I know you're grateful, but like it must be just so cool to be like, I get to see the world here and see all these amazing people doing incredible things. Do you get a little emotional when you think about it that way?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, because there's a difference between traveling as a tourist, and there's a difference between when you get to travel as a dignitary. It's night and day, because when you're
Yeah.
traveling as a dignitary, people go out of their way to make sure like you're being taken care
Uh,
of. Not to say that doesn't happen when you're a tourist, but for the most part, you know, people are just kind of like, oh, you're just a tourist, like whatever. But when you're a dignitary, they go all out to make sure that they're serving as an example of their country, and they want to
yeah.
make sure they're impressing you. They want to make sure that you feel like you're being respected and taken care of. And it's really surreal. I was walking around almost like, do I deserve this? Like, I don't really know if I deserve this kind of treatment because it's so good. Um, but it also makes you be like, oh, you're not a tourist. You're a representative of your country and your city and also your ethnicity. So like you better act right. You better not do and act in a disparaging way. So you're definitely a little more on edge, but it's a great feeling, to be honest. And yeah, like I said, I'm grateful. Like, you know, especially in a country like Japan, they really respect their culture,
Mm.
and part of their culture is making sure that they come across as welcoming and very accommodating. And there's something really special about that. Like, it didn't even matter where I was, like if it was like um a convenience store or like a five-star hotel, they were like very respectful and accommodating. It was really impressive.
Mhm. When you were looking at the North Korea South Korea border, I don't know about you. Sometimes I get caught in those YouTube, like life in North Korea videos, because you're just like, you're stunned that this they have to live that way with that dictator. Um, were you able to see like military or armed individuals, or sounds like it wasn't just like, it was just sort of barren and empty, but did you get any sense of sort of the patrolling that happens at the border?
Yeah, they had like binoculars, right, that you could see
Yeah.
farther. And our guide was pointing out where there was like military jeeps, and you could see some soldiers kind of walking about. So yeah, it was real. And then they also pointed out a bridge. There was a bridge like a few miles away from where we were. Um, and they explained to us how like a few months prior they had bombed the bridge. The North Korea had bombed the bridge just because they just wanted to create even more distance between North and South Korea. And it was a bridge that was already on their side, so it was kind of like not really necessary, but it was just more like a message they were sending out, like, we really don't want you over here.
Mhm.
So they tell us that periodically they'll just start bombing their own land just to
Mhm.
kind of scare off whoever's on the edge of the border. So that that was kind of, eerie to hear them say that they're willing to do that just to create more distance between themselves. And it was really amazing to go to the South Korean War museum that they had in Seoul. Like, we didn't really learn too much about the South Korean War in school. So being in that museum and seeing how seriously and how grateful the South Korean people are to the United States for for what they did during that war was really humbling. Like, I it was beautiful, it was somber, but it was kind of like, wow, like they're really grateful for US helping them out during that conflict, because they wouldn't have the quality of life that they have now if it wasn't for that sacrifice. And they show it with that museum. It was awe inspiring, to be honest.
Mhm. And what were your accommodations like? Were you staying in five-star hotels? What did you have to pay? Did the city pay? How did that work?
Yeah, I use my city travel funds pay for my pay for my registration for the trip, because
Yeah.
I had to pay to join the trip. But
Mhm.
then I use my own money to buy, my plane ticket over there, my hotels, um, my transportation around the area, all that I had to pay for myself. But the registration for that, only for that Sister Cities trip, that was paid for by my travel fund. And then the rest of the time I spent in Tokyo in South Korea, I paid for myself. And then when I got to China, just a few first days that I was there as part of the Sister City trip, that was paid for by the Chinese government. And then the rest of it I paid for myself. So once I was done with the sister city part of my trip to China, I went on a just regular tourist trip to the Great Wall and Tiananmen Square and the Forbidden City, and where the terracotta warriors are buried. So that stuff I paid for myself. But yeah, it was a once in a lifetime trip, and I'm glad I did it. It was a month. It was a long time, and it really messed up my sleep schedule because there's a 16-hour difference. But I was still responding to people via email when I could. In China, they have a pretty strong firewall, so I couldn't really use my phone there at all. But when I could, when I was in Japan and South Korea, I was able to join meetings and respond to people. So that was pretty cool. It's such an interesting time in our history to travel because I never once pulled out money. I just used my credit card to pay for everything. I never actually pulled out any Japanese, South Korean, or Chinese currency. I was just, everything's credit card based now. And then I was able to use my phone to translate like in real time to communicate in all three countries. It's amazing. It's amazing time to travel right now. And I really highly encourage everybody to do it as much as possible.
Yeah. You made some comments in one of the meetings when you came back about, I forget the specific issue, but we're sort of talking about environmental issues and, pollution. And I think it was the city was discussing some of the things it's doing, but you sort of talked about like how you thought it was maybe fog or something, and it was actually pollution. But can you talk about the differences, just sort of the visually from Santa Barbara and what you saw there?
Yeah, Japan was very clean. So was South Korea, and it's just amazing how like these cities that I was in, like Tokyo and Seoul, they have millions of people. We're talking about 20 something million people, and I didn't really see any litter, no graffiti anywhere. There was no public trash cans. Their culture is very much, you create the mess, you take the mess with you, and then you take care of the mess yourself. So you had to just carry whatever trash you had in your pockets until you got to your home or hotel or whatever, and that's when you throw it away. But in China, it was very much similar. Like there was no litter or anything like that. But when we landed in this airport, we got out and it looked like it was really foggy. And I was like, oh, I should have pulled my sweatshirt out. But then I realized, oh wait, that's not fog, that's smog. The smog was so thick, it looked like fog. And I have asthma, so as soon as I got out of the airport and started breathing, you could feel it in your lungs, and it made me realize like, oh, this is why we have regulations. This is why we have to get our cars smog checked. This is why we force manufacturers to build in a certain way, because we want to avoid stuff like that. And when I say this to older people, they tell me like, oh yeah, I lived in LA during the 60s and 70s. Like, you have no idea. Like, it was terrible, before the EPA was created and we implemented those, those restrictions and those regulations. So I'm really grateful that, we live in a country that have that, because otherwise I don't think people realize how bad it is in other countries where they don't have those regulations. It's bad.
Yeah. Yeah. We take it for granted to some degree. Some people do anyway. Yeah. That's great though. That's so cool that you're able to have those opportunities and then bring all that wisdom and experience back to Santa Barbara, both professionally and personally. That was great. Let's talk a little bit about some city issues, Oscar, and let's start with rent control or stabilization, depending on what term you want to use. The Santa Barbara City Council talked about it this past week, sort of the latest in this ongoing effort to draft some kind of ordinance. And there was a lot of drama. You were at the meeting remotely, but there was a lot of drama when two council members came forward with this sort of I guess Kristen Snedding called it a sample ordinance, but it was, this 15-page sort of ordinance to create this. And there was a lot of pushback at that time. But then, you were over there saying, Hey, this is nothing new. We've been talking about this for a long time, and here we are. It's going to happen. It appears if a vote is taken during this council, the votes are there, and the council, I guess, is looking at even a rent increase freeze moratorium. And so talk to me about why Santa Barbara. I know you're a supporter of it. Needs rent control / stabilization. Why is this important issue for you and for people of Santa Barbara?
Well, ever since I decided to run back in 2018, this was an issue that kept being brought up to me by the people, not by me. To be completely honest with you, like it wasn't an issue for me in particular because I live with my mom and my housing is secure. She owns her home, and that was an issue that I didn't ever have to. I have the privilege of being able to grow up in an area where like I didn't have to worry about getting kicked out of my house.
Yeah.
um, but when I went door knocking and I had meet and greets, that was the issue that people kept bringing up to me, that they wanted somebody to represent them, to fight that fight for them. And it was one of those moments where I realized like, oh, this isn't necessarily about what affects me personally. This is literally doing the work for other people that need somebody to fight for them. And I don't want to say that some of my colleagues kind of don't realize that or they forget about that, but just judging by some of the comments that have been made in those meetings, where some of my colleagues will say like, you know that this hasn't been talked about enough, or that we haven't met enough to address this, to make it a serious issue or whatever. I'm kind of sitting there like, what are you talking about? Like, ever since I ran in 2018, this has been a major issue, and some of them have been in office way longer than that. So I'm like, where have you been, or are you just ignoring it, or what's going on? Especially last year in 2024, I ran for re-election, so I knocked on thousands of doors and I spoke to thousands of people, convincing them to re-elect me. And again, this was one of the major issues they kept bringing up, saying like, if you want my vote, then fight this fight for me, because this is what's affecting me right now. I need somebody to be able to represent me on this level. And next year is going to be an election year for some of my colleagues. They're going to run for mayor, and some new people are going to run to replace the seats of the council members that are termed out. And I hope they ask that question at the door, because it's going to be a serious issue going forward. And if they're not asking that question at the door, then they're not doing it right. And they have to ask these questions, because I essentially took a survey of my community, and the majority of them were in favor of some kind of rent stabilization. So again, it wasn't like something that I was passionate about myself. It was something that the people kept telling me, I need you to fight this fight for me. And that's how it is, like that's how it should be in a representative democracy.
Let me ask you about the other side of that, right? So you've talked to the property owners, you've talked to the landlords. We've all heard their arguments. We won't be able to invest in our buildings. We're going to raise the rents as much as we can prior to this ordinance. Um, Not all property owners are filthy rich, and when you do something like this, it does affect them. Not obviously proportionally the same as tenants, but it does still affect them financially. They say things like, where has this worked elsewhere? They say things like, oh, all this is going to do is help the current tenant and they're never going to leave. And, even like these economics people, Peter Rupert came up during the meeting. Um, you as a representative, of course, you talk to people at the door, but then there's all these other people in the community who you also represent. So can you talk a little bit about how you sort of talk to those people, and how you reconcile that in your position when you're hearing all of these other sort of comments, that are contrarian to what some of the, people at the door were telling you?
Sure. when we formed the housing crisis ad hoc committee, we intentionally went out to meet with as many realtors, property owners, property managers to get their perspectives on it, And I also, going back to me running for reelection, I went and met with the board of realtors and went through their endorsement process, even though I knew I wasn't going to get it, but I just felt like it was appropriate for me to give them the time to question me on what I was planning on accomplishing in my reelection. And in those meetings, I was very open to hearing their perspectives and also working on a compromise. I almost felt like during my endorsement meeting with the board of realtors that I was borderline begging them, like, give me a number you're willing to settle on when it comes to the percentage that we could put a cap on the rents. Even if it's like 8%, 7%, like, give me a number. So at the very least, you all felt like you had an input on it, and none of them wanted it to cooperate, and now it's to the point where, we're essentially going to be putting a percent on them that they could have picked themselves, but they chose not to. They had rather not have the conversation at all than to cooperate with us at some certain level. So, I mean, it's kind of come to this because, we weren't, in a way, they were just kind of dragging their feet on this issue as long as they could. And now we're kind of left in a place where, it doesn't seem like it's getting any better when it comes to the economy and the cost of living. So we kind of have to do something to address that. And this is one of those issues. I know that people like comparing other cities and how it's worked or not worked, but like, you hear the critics say the same thing, like, Santa Barbara's different. I agree, Santa Barbara is different. So when people are comparing us to New York or Minneapolis or San Francisco, I don't necessarily equate those to Santa Barbara. Those are different communities, those are different cities, and we can learn from their mistakes and make adjustments to reflect that here. So again, I just hope that they're willing to be a little more cooperative, and we can come to some kind of middle ground, because I do want to make sure that everyone's treated as equitably as possible.
Yeah. Yeah. They had opportunity to maybe come up with some sort of compromise percentage, and now they may not have any say in it at this point, or they're going to pursue litigation, sort of. Let me ask you, there's a little bit of, how should I put it? Councilmember Megan Harmon sort of pushed back on that memo publicly and sort of said, hey, this is not how we should do policy. It should not be behind the scenes, and it should be transparent. And I know that some of the tenants groups got a little bit annoyed with that and sort of were bothered and, questioned, like, wait a minute, what's going on? Why wouldn't you be wholeheartedly supportive of this process? It's been going on for years. And, Harmon was not, I don't think, and I'm not going to get into all the whole little tedious details, but, wasn't involved in the creation of this in a way that Councilmember Santa Maria and Councilmember Sneddon were. But were you, what do you think? Did you question Councilmember Harmon's sort of commitment to rent control? Were you bothered at all that there was a little bit of a, hey, this isn't transparent conversation at that meeting? You've worked with her since the beginning. So, what would you say sort of about that? Her pushback on not the policy, but on the process.
Yeah, I as I stated, I was confused by that response, because I'm a strong believer that communication is a two-way street, and we have to meet in the middle. So to act as if there wasn't an effort to notify all supported parties about this initiative, I'm just confused as how she got there when, I mean, we've been talking about it for years, and we get criticized whenever we hire a consultant to advise us on an issue. And then here are two council members who went and got a consultant to do it for free. And yet that, instead of that being like a savvy way of addressing the issue, that came off as being shady or conniving. I just kind of felt like that was just really confusing. Like, what? Like, we completely bypass an entire step that we know people use as a delay tactic, but yet you're marking it as a negative. That was a little confusing for me to indicate, especially since, again, we formed this housing crisis ad hoc committee. We've had town halls about the issue. I mean, when you count all the meetings we've had at city council and all the advocates for tenants and all the advocates for property owners that show up, like those are public meetings too, that we were all at. All city staff was at that. All council members were at that. All, like, as many community members were there voicing their opinion for hours, at this point, dozens of times over now. So again, I was just really confused. Like, what? Like, what do you mean? Like, this is coming out of nowhere? Like, huh? Like, I'll even say, like, if you remember when Kathy Murillo was at the end of her term, she and we signed a 2-person memo to bring this item forward. And I will admit that was out of nowhere, because that was her last attempt of trying to make this come forward, and that was out of nowhere. We did not have as much prep work as we do now. So when I look at the two moments of when Kathy and I pushed that 2-person memo to bring this item up, yeah, that was out of nowhere. But this one, no, there is years of prep work leading up to that moment. So again, I don't necessarily agree with my colleague's response to it. I think there's something lost in translation somewhere, because I'm not sure. I mean, if she felt like she wasn't made a part of it, then she could have just said that. But I don't agree with the words she used, but I understand how she might have felt left out, especially since she has been carrying the flag for that issue for years. So I understand her frustration. I just don't agree with the way she kind of presented it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think I think I had reported this or maybe said this on Jerry's show, but if Randy Rouse and Eric Friedman, or Randy Rouse and Mike Jordan, had worked with some organization or some consultant and crafted a draft ordinance and attached it to a 2-person memo, I think that Harmon's sort of comments from a sort of a policy perspective would be more vivid to you and others. Like, hey, wait a minute, this is not how we do it. This is a 7-person board, and the staff has to reach it. Staff has to work on that. It's, clearly, like, there's no chance that if those two drafted some ordinance on some issue they cared about, that was more of like a moderate type conservative issue, there would be incredible pushback. And the higher arguments would be, wait a minute, the little small caveat to that, of course, is, this has been talked about for a long time. But, I do see her perspective in terms of inclusion, right? And especially since it's been her issue. It isn't like she's never talked about it before. She's talked about it. So it is what it is. But I don't think anyone, including you, questions her commitment to some sort of rent control, rent stabilization ordinance, and which is ultimately what matters. And she said it on Tuesday, right? Like, the votes are here for sure.
Mhm.
Let me shift gears a little bit and talk about Paseo Nuevo. All right. So this is another issue that has been hot this year. And wow, what a meeting where AB Commercial, Georgetown Company, and sort of it all came to a head where it's like, city of Santa Barbara, are you going to give away this land to us so that we can build housing? And they reduced the total number down to something like 24 with kind of a verbal commitment to build more later. And it all kind of blew up a little bit at this meeting. And I think you pretty much were on the side of some housing is better than no housing, and we want to do something with this. But what is your, talk to me about Paseo Nuevo. What do you want to see happen there in the context of AB's proposal?
I met with them a few times, and yeah, they didn't necessarily give off like hometown vibes, to be completely honest. They're from the East Coast, and they definitely had that East Coast persona, but I did I was convinced that they did want to make a project there that would work for the community. For sure I got that from them. It was just kind of like, in my personal opinion, I didn't mind how big it was and how many units they want to put in there, because like we need the housing. So I was willing to agree to it, obviously we got some input from the community saying that it was too big, that the project in general was just not good for the community to give away public land. And there definitely was this feeling of like, well, you don't have a choice. You don't have any other options. Like this is it or nothing, And I didn't like that. And during the meeting, I didn't really like how city staff and they were saying how once you calculate how much we were going to have to pay off the remainder of the lease and how much it would cost for staff time to go through the selling process of the land, if we wanted to sell it ourselves, that it was going to come out to essentially nothing, that we weren't going to come out to a profit, that essentially the land then had no value to it. That to me was offensive with the historical context of how we acquired that land, right? By killing and enslaving the people that originally lived there. So that kind of like irked me the wrong way. I was just kind of like, I really don't like how they're talking about this land, knowing that there's been blood spilt on it, and, call that as poetic as you want or whatever, but I felt like it needed to be said. And when I try to think, my colleagues all had some really great points and questions. So when I'm up there, I'm always trying to think like, okay, well, they just said that, which I've already been thinking about, and city staff has already addressed that question. Like I need to come up with a question that nobody else has asked, So I try to think as unorthodox as possible, so that way I have another angle to come at this issue with. And the one angle I hadn't heard anybody is, what if we give the land back to the indigenous people that were there originally? And so I asked the question, and city staff said that they essentially would be in the same position that we are. They would own the land, but not the buildings, and they would still have to pay out the remainder of the lease. And then we as a city wouldn't have control. It'd go to this other completely independent group, and the process is a very complicated statewide process. And I wanted staff to explain to me the process, because it's one thing to say that, it's another thing to see it all like on paper. This is step 1, 2, 3 to make that happen. And I've yet to see that, and city staff let me know that it's going to take too much staff time to research it, so that if I actually wanted that information, I would have to have a 2-person memo to have city staff go through with it. So I was kind of like, okay. But yeah, that was my logic behind, saying that. nobody from the Chumash tribe has reached out to me, so that to me is also an indicator that they were probably not interested in that situation themselves. But yeah, I'm always trying to think of just other ways that we can, solve a problem or address an issue, and I know that as completely off the wall this idea might sound, but I don't necessarily think having like a casino downtown would be bad for the community. I think it would draw more tourists. It could provide a lot more jobs locally. And theoretically, if they were to take over that building, they wouldn't have to redevelop it. They just have to bring in the machines and the tables and leave it as is, and that would draw quite a few people. But again, that is an off the wall idea, very much acknowledging that. But I know there's quite a bit of people in the community that wouldn't mind having a casino downtown. But again, I don't think anybody on the council would be supportive of that, so to speak.
Well, I got to say, so when you said that, it was one of those moments where, like, it was like, wow, that's amazing. Like, he actually went there. He brought that up because, yeah, they're talking about how this land has no value, which is ridiculous on its face because, of course, it has value. Now, I guess technically, if they own this and they own this and people don't work together, then there is no theoretical value. But obviously, the land has value. And then you go into the history of, hey, wait a minute. Of course, this land is historical. There's legacy, and we need to acknowledge that. And that was pretty incredible that you brought that up. And I gotta say, my phone blew up with like text messages.
I know a lot of people
in the meeting. They're like, "What is he saying?"
Yeah,
from various people watching.
Yeah.
Did you get that too?
Yeah, quite a few people were just like, "Are you serious?" And I'm like, "Well, yeah, I brought it up on the dais. It's pretty serious."
Yeah. Hey, you guys can't get along. Guys can't agree. Let's just give it back, to
Right.
the Chumash,
Yeah.
I bet you guys will figure out a way now to work together, right?
Right.
And so, yeah, that was pretty interesting. It's interesting, the city staff. I mean, how much time does it take just to put together the state and federal process for disposition of land to a tribal group? Like, I feel like we could do that on Google in like 2 hours if we wanted to.
Yeah. And I'm worried about doing that because every now and then you might get false information by doing it. That's why I wanted city staff to do it. Mm-hmm. But I might reach out to my state and federal representatives and ask them myself about the process.
Yeah. And I don't know, you spend any time at the casino up in San Diego?
No, I don't. I don't gamble. I don't like gambling. Uh-huh. But when people ask me, so for example, like right now, the hotel industry has reached out to me. The chamber has reached out to me saying, "Hey, you all are facing this deficit. Whatever you do not bring up the TOT. Don't bring up more taxes." So again, I'm trying to think like, where else could we get money then?
Right.
In order to get money from things, in order to generate new money, we're gonna have to do new things to generate that new money. Otherwise, our fallback is to raise the taxes on travelers and tourism that come to our city. So a lot of people might think, well, that's just affecting the travelers and the tourists, but it's not necessarily the case because a lot of these businesses they depend on travelers and tourists, and if the price keeps going up, they see less of that, and then our local businesses start to get affected by that. So I'm just trying to come up with ideas that we can bring in new money to address that fact. And I feel like going to Japan, South Korea, cities like Tokyo and Seoul, you would walk around and you'd run into a casino, this small little arcade of slot machines, and they're everywhere and they're really well kept, and it wasn't a big deal. So that was kind of eye-opening to me too, that, we could potentially have something like that in Santa Barbara. But again, it's just an off-the-wall idea, so I don't want people to get all up in arms about it, but just think it over because we're trying to come up with solutions, Yeah.
I did see some support on social media for your comment. So, I mean, it is It is out there. And I know you're just like wanting to ground everybody in the realities of this by bringing it up. I know that that's what's sort of behind it. Let's talk real quickly. We got about 15 minutes or so, and I appreciate you taking time on your birthday to talk to me. But State Street, real quickly, are you, when I'm down there, sometimes it's busy, sometimes it's not. It's not in the evening unless there's programming. Some of the e-bikers, not all of the e-bikers, are still a bit confrontational with like senior citizens or people who they think are vulnerable.
Yeah.
I've noticed that. What's your latest view on what we should do with those 7 blocks of State Street that are currently closed to vehicles?
Well, man, right now, I will admit this is like personal, that the issue of State Street is starting to fatigue me. I'm starting to get tired of it. Like to the point where I'm just, I get tempted to just open it back up again and not worry about it anymore and worry about more poignant issues, But then the community comes out and they reel me back in saying like, no, this is what we want. And again, last year when I ran for office and I was knocking on people's doors, I would ask them about State Street and the majority of the people said they like it closed. So it is taxing on me, like I am getting tired of it, to be honest, because in my opinion, there are bigger issues. But yeah, as of now, the majority of the people that I speak to still like it closed, and I feel like there's still potential to make changes to it. I'm a big supporter of the barriers that come up and down. I think we should have those so that certain times during the day we could have it open. I'm a big believer too in public shaming. I myself have seen these bad bike riders acting up, and I pulled out my phone and I started to record them.
Yeah.
And when I tell them that I'm recording them and that I'm a part of the city, they leave. They immediately take off. They take off. So like, I'm not. Let me just say I'm not encouraging anybody to do that, but just to let you know that they do bug me too.
Sure.
That, and I am willing to publicly shame them as well. With that being said, again, on my trips to Japan, South Korea, and China, these are cultures where there are so many people and they're all trying to get somewhere. And we're talking from toddlers to elderly people using walkers and canes. And there's motorcycles going by them. There's trucks.
Mm-hmm.
There's all kinds of stuff. And like no one bats an eye. Everybody walks so fluidly around each other. It was impressive. I was just kind of like, whoa, if you transported a Santa Barbara resident here, they'd lose their minds. They'd go insane. They probably wouldn't be able to take a step because they'd be too scared compared to how it is in Japan and South Korea and China. Like it was awesome, to be honest, like how fluid they all are. It didn't matter what age, didn't matter what height they were all walking alongside each other with motorcycles and trucks and cars and everything, So I know it's possible. I know it's possible. It's just, it might be just so new to our culture here that it's scary, but there are cultures all over the world that do it every day.
Yeah.
They've been doing it since they were born and to the day they die. So yeah, that's kind of how I feel about it. Like right now I'm still in favor of keeping it closed, but I am getting tired of it. Like we have to come up with a solution, with a middle ground. And I think having barriers that go up and down would be a good compromise.
Yeah, we're special in Santa Barbara. Sometimes we're a little delicate,
Yeah.
But yeah, and you're really big on reflecting the needs and the wants of the community that you serve, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think the other side of that too is sometimes as a leader, as an elected leader, you have to just make a decision. And part of that growth is sometimes people aren't going to be happy with you in the moment, but over time they will maybe see that you had some insight that they didn't. So you'd have to pick and choose those issues. Maybe on rent control, that's something that like that affects like families and children and if you have to move your education, and that's more of a societal problem. So on that one, you're like, yes, I back the people, right? And on State Street, it's a little bit different. It's more of a policy thing, and maybe on that one you're like, you know, this hasn't been working. We're still complaining. We're still talking about it. We'll try it and we'll see if anything changes. And then when the master plan comes out, we can always figure out what to do then. So sometimes you kind of have to make those decisions that are hard in the short term, and in the long term, they might look better with age, So I think maybe at some point you're going to be like, close it or open it or just make a decision. Because if you let the public guide you on everything, then that can be a tough spot on all these issues.
It's true. It's an interesting philosophy to leadership for sure. Sometimes I compare it to like an attorney who knows their client is guilty, but their client keeps saying, no, I need you to fight my case that I'm innocent, So that's kind of how I feel sometimes. Not to say that I think it's wrong to keep State Street open. I'm just getting tired of it. That's it. That's all I'm trying to say.
Yeah. And I do miss the days of driving down there and cruising a little bit. And I know that's like heresy to some environmentalists, but there's cultural, the bikes are cultural too, that's important, but the cars are too, they're both important. Let's talk a little bit about how you feel. What are you, 8 years in now on the council? You got like a couple extra years, I think, because of redistricting and district elections, because you were elected in 18, right?
Right? In July of 18 is when I was sworn in, and so it's been a little over 7 years now. So it's been a while.
How do you feel? Does it set in that you're kind of like now approaching the end of your tenure with term limits? Do you feel like you're exactly where you want to be? I know we've talked about how people have treated you over the years, and initially it's a little cold and you've got to assert yourself, and there's all these subconscious biases that happen when you're in these spaces with people who are not used to interacting with representatives like you, from the West Side. How are you feeling right now? Are you good? Are you still fighting these battles?
Not really, not anymore. I feel like at first I was so new and different that either people didn't recognize me or some people that didn't like me because of being so new and different, But now I feel like I've put in so much time and I've shown up to a lot of things that I've proven to a large portion of the community that I do care about what's happening, that I do want to be a representative for the city and my community. And there's a little respect that goes with that I feel like they appreciate, even though if they might not agree with me politically. And I felt like it just needed time to be earned, And now almost there's not a day goes by where I'm out in public where a complete stranger comes up to me and says, hey, I just want to let you know you're the only one that responded to my email when I sent it in. And, that takes a lot of time because we get, depending on the day, we get hundreds of emails a day, but I make sure I sit there and I get through every one of them. And at first, people were saying, no one cares if you respond. But now years later, when people say that to me almost every day, it shows that they do care. At the very least, they just want to be known that they got heard.
Yeah.
And it's good to be able to go to as many things as possible because, again, some people, believe it or not, don't have the time to respond to an email, but for whatever reason, they find themselves at this event and they see me, and that's their opportunity to say, hey, I don't like the way that you're dealing with this issue, or, hey, I like the way that you're dealing with this issue, or I have an issue. Can you help me? Sometimes it just takes that 1 minute interaction to help people have faith in their local government or the government in general. Mm-hmm. And it does weigh on me a lot to try to get to all these events as many as I can. but I feel like it's something at least one of us has to do. We all have our strengths on council, and I think mine is just showing up, making sure that I'm there.
Yeah, well, I would think universally the feedback from everyone, whether they're conservative, liberal, in the middle, non-political, always tell me Oscar is the nicest guy. Like they always like you as a person, and they do mention that you are responsive. And so that's quite an accomplishment because, with everybody, there's always some tension, drama. They don't like you for some reasons, but I do think you've earned that. And even if they disagree with you on rent control, they're like, but he listened to us and he was very nice about it, right? And that's important. So
Yeah.
what do you want to do the last 3 years here on the council? Do you have any sort of like, I got to get to these issues, or what's sort of your plan as you look at the end of your term?
Yeah, I've only got 3 years left, and I'm trying to get as much done as possible. There's quite a few right now. What I'm trying to address is like what's going on with our undocumented immigrant community and how they feel right now, and what I can do within my legal power to protect them, support them. Also, I've been continually working with the school district to making sure that our community has access to the school campuses after school hours, so that they have open play areas. And I'm trying to address, well, I kind of already said that with what's going on with our personal data within the city, with issues like the flock surveillance cameras that are posted up around the community, whether or not they're giving away that data to federal agencies, and what we can do to protect our citizens' personal data. Those are issues that are really important to me right now that I'm trying to address as much as possible.
Yeah, those are all super important issues. And I know the city's like, no, we're not doing that with the data, the license plate reader. However, there were a lot of searches around this time for this data. So that story is sort of still developing for sure. And, and you are very close to this, deportation issue as a Mexican American and child of immigrants. And, these are real situations, and it does bother me that some people, not all, but some people kind of just quietly, look the other way, or it's not that fiery of an issue for them, when it really should be the number one issue for so many people. Because, as you know, it's not just these violent criminals; it's everyday people, and everyday people are the ones that make Santa Barbara work. So we need those voices on the council to keep talking about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Going back to the data issue. Yeah, the city, we are not giving out that information, but that doesn't mean that the companies that we contract with aren't. That's my issue. Is that we ourselves as an agency aren't giving out that information, but these companies seem like they are. And some people say, well, isn't that illegal? I'm like, yeah, it is. But do they care? Like, will the president give them a pardon? Probably, because they're doing his bidding. So it's important that we fight back against that kind of stuff. And also, however you feel about the undocumented immigrant community, they're a huge portion of our economy. And if they disappear, then we're gonna suffer quite deeply. Not to mention that they're also detaining U.S. citizens. Like, people keep saying, like, if you're a citizen, you have nothing to worry about. Like, yeah, you do. You can just see how many U.S. citizens they've detained, and you're being surveillanced. So yeah, it's a bigger issue than people like to think that it is.
Yeah. Well, I think it's time we should wrap up here. We're at time, and I appreciate it, Oscar, you talking to me about all these issues and catching up the public on these things that you've been involved with. And you've recently reelected easily, handily. The West Side District really wants you as their representative, and you got 3 years left. And we'll talk again, I'm sure, several times before then, and maybe you've got a political future down the road, other places. Who knows? But thank you, Oscar. Appreciate your time.
Yeah, I guess this is a good moment to officially announce that I'm running for mayor. No, I'm kidding.
Yes. Councilmember Sneddon just said, "Oh, thank goodness he's not running for mayor." You got to clear the field, for one.
I am supporting Councilmember Sneddon because I think she's very qualified. She's a mom, she's a scientist, she's a teacher. She was very respectful to me from the get-go when I was super new, and I can tell that she grew up here. She really cares about the community, and yeah, she was even kind enough to first ask me if I wanted to run for mayor, and that if I said yes to her, then she wasn't going to run. And I said, no, I believe that you are going to be a good representative for this community. So I gave her my endorsement.
Yeah. Yeah, it's hard to, not like somebody who remembers Piccadilly Square.
Right. Yeah.
She mentions that a lot, where she used to work. Yeah. So we got a big mayoral campaign coming up, and I can't even imagine how intense that's going to get.
It's going to be wild. Yeah.
All right, Oscar. Thanks for your time. Happy birthday again. Have a great day.
Thank you, Josh.